Hey, dear rock star, we're back, and I'm getting to do something really, really fun. Getting to hang out with my good friend David and talk about his life as a starter. He has two other co-founders, Chris and Matt.
Yes.
And they have started something called Shift Agent. But it's much deeper than just Shift Agent, because at Dear Rockstar, we're all about the life, right? And living our why. So for everyone that doesn't know you already, give them a little brief bio, and then we'll go into kind of the journey towards starting something.
Sure. Well, Pam, thanks for having me. It's really awesome to be here.
Absolutely.
What a great environment just to talk about life and starting things and hard times, good times, and what it takes to keep going.
Yeah.
So I guess I could start by saying I was born in New York to parents who had just found the Lord at the time in their early 20s, and then they had me about 2 years later. So being a firstborn, moving to North Carolina when I was 6, and having Yankee parents in the Deep South is kind of an interesting way to grow up.
Yeah.
So needless to say, my parents didn't know what pig pickings were and things like that you grow up knowing about in North Carolina. So I was always kind of a fish out of water in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And growing up, I struggled a lot with loneliness. So I had friends, and I was on the basketball team and things like that, but loneliness was something that I became acutely aware of. Wow. And so anyways, I had a very good childhood. My parents really cared for me and really instilled in me the roots of faith and gave me a stable background. My parents have been married over 40 years.
Wow.
And so later when I was working with college students a lot, it became very apparent to me that I had a lot to give back as a result of what my parents had given me and shown me. For folks that really struggle with what it is to trust other people.
Yeah.
I can actually trust my parents. It was really in college where I first began to find community and to find friends. And I found folks that were like-minded, and some of them were younger than me, but some of them were a little bit farther along. And it was just such an amazing thing to find people that truly expressed care for me. And I began to really thrive in that environment and to learn how much I didn't know about community. And so the story there is one that led me to actually finding my wife on a missions trip in Panama City Beach, of all places.
So you go on a mission trip?
Yes. And so I went to North Carolina State. I'm from North Carolina, and my wife went to Alabama, Roll Tide.
Okay.
And we met in Panama City Beach. And
of course you did.
Yeah. So we stayed with about 70 other college students in a, essentially like a beach dive hotel for a summer.
Okay.
And I worked at a water park. I was a junior. I had finished my junior year.
Okay.
So I was heading into my first senior year, which is essentially being a junior again.
Yeah.
So time passed after that. It took me 3 years to eventually convince my wife to date me. So I was very persistent with that.
3 years?
3 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Now that is a sign of a starter. You didn't give up for 3 years?
That's right. Well, I did date one other person in between there.
Yeah, but you didn't give up. You still...
I didn't, no. In fact, this is when email was kind of a thing. You actually read your emails. You were excited to get them.
Your romance was at the beginning of email?
It was. It's funny because I had the foresight somehow to print out all of the emails that we had exchanged when we were in college.
Oh my God.
It's really funny to go back and read some of those. And actually this year we're celebrating 15 years. So I got a job at NASA, actually, working in databases and stuff like that. It's funny because I had a communication degree in public relations. And after a year of working for the government, my boss came up to me after a year and he says, "You have a computer information systems degree, right?" And I was like, "No, I have a public relations degree." And he was like, "Oh." So I don't know if that meant this explains things or what. But, the culture of working at NASA and just in that, government contract environment is so relaxed. I was pretty much the only person within about 15 to 20 years of my age category.
Yeah, you were young.
Yeah, everyone smoked there. So I felt like I smoked because I learned the culture, like everybody goes out every 15 minutes and spends 6 minutes smoking. And this is when you get to know people.
Yeah.
So I would go out and hang out.
Okay.
But anyway, that was my first job.
And then what?
Well, then my wife was actually pursuing med school. We were living in Huntsville, Alabama at the time. She was working as a research chemist. I'm working at NASA. And I was pursuing ministry full time.
Okay.
And she wanted to be a doctor. We were trying to figure out, how is this going to work together? Like, how can this happen? And of course, like all people in their 20s, you think that you're supposed to land the perfect thing you're supposed to be doing at 25. She actually got into med school. And we decided that, well, unless God rains down something from the sky to tell us not to pursue this opportunity, that we were going to do it.
Yeah.
And so she quit her job. I kept mine. We were going to actually commute, have her commute, and I was going to commute and just kind of move to strategically allow us to do this med school thing. And then the night of her last day of work, so it was Thursday night, and we were waking up Friday morning. It was her last day of work. We had rented a truck. We were moving into an apartment, ready to go. She woke up with a dream, and God actually spoke to her in a dream, which never happens. But it's one of those things where
it hasn't spoken to me in a dream either.
Super, super clear. Just
super clear. And the message was?
It spoke right to her heart, and it was, trust me, do not go to med school. I want you to join staff with this with this campus ministry.
So this was not on her to-do list or her bucket list.
Yeah, and neither was calling the dean of admissions and saying, hey, I need to give up my spot. God's actually called me to give up my spot in med school.
Yeah.
So then she had to call her dad. So that call was hard, but then calling her dad and saying that I'm not going to medical school was really tough. So you can imagine, I now feel like the son-in-law who's like taken his daughter out of her career path. So it was like walking on eggshells for about a year.
Okay, what we love about Dear Rockstar is we got to be flexible. As entrepreneurs and starters, you got to look at your surroundings, and we were starting to have a thunderstorm.
Yeah, we live in Florida, so.
So we're now inside. Thanks for being flexible.
My pleasure.
Okay, so you got into Campus Crusade and got into ministry.
We did. So long story short, we were placed in Orlando at UCF, and I was 27 at the time. And we ended up working at UCF for 9.5 years with students and had a blast.
Wow.
So in terms of startups, I feel like each year...
That was a startup launching that campus ministry?
Yes. So each year was like a startup, because you have a group of students that you're working with, you have objectives and plans and goals and things that you're working towards, and then that year finishes, and then half your leaders graduate.
Oh, wow.
So then the next year,
cultivate your whole team again.
Right, and you have to think about who's in the room, what are we doing, how are we going to get there. So it was a lot of startup type activity that was going on over time.
And then you have your monetization, because in that model, you had to raise your own support, right?
We did.
So you were your own little social venture.
That's right. So we learned how to run lean, right? So we've had...
What does that mean? Top ramen forever, or?
Well, if you think about it, yeah. So if you think about the average church that you might know about that has 700 or 800 people in it, it's going to have a pretty sizable budget. We had a lot of people engaged in a lot of different things, and we were serving the campus and serving the students with everything from counseling to leadership to providing events for hundreds of students every week. And we would do this for basically like $5,000 a year. The whole year, that was our budget. And the difficulty that we found, particularly in Orlando, where we are, is that there's a lot of ministries. Yeah. And a lot of people
It seems like the world headquarters for
everything. So it means that a lot of people and donors are actually sort of tapped out. So what we did, we created hoodies, which is a little bit, you wouldn't think that in Florida, hoodies would be the thing.
Seattle, no, where I'm from, Seattle, hoodies work.
Yes, but the funny thing is,
cool.
It actually works at UCF too, because in the summer when it's 95 outside, it's 65 inside. So you go inside the building and you're freezing.
The thing about living in Florida from Seattle, once it gets hot, then you always need to be dressed for it to be cool, because everyone's at 62 on their air conditioning.
That's right. So as it turns out, these hoodies, what we did was we printed, a first run of these hoodies, and we said, if you join the Be the Change Club for $5 a month, you get a free hoodie. And we couldn't give them away. My goal was to get to $50,000 a year of annual budget. It's like if I had, I wouldn't even know what to do with that much money. But actually I do, but it'd be such a change from having such a little. Anyway, so we started down the path. And by the time that I stopped working there in 2012, we were up to about $1,500 a month just from
the hoodies. Okay, so how did Shift Agent get started?
It got started because as I worked.
What is Shift Agent?
Oh, Shift Agent is a company that we've started around an application that we've developed that helps any organization that needs to schedule their employees.
Okay, so it's a technology solution
an application
for schedules?
Yeah, that lives online.
Okay.
Currently, it's just a web-based application. We don't have you're not required to download anything from Google Play or Android. You can just go online on your phone.
And what's the number one benefit?
The number one benefit is, well, there's actually two. And one is it's going to help a company get rid of lost profits that come through wasted labor.
Okay.
And the time that's invested in that and all of the resources that are wasted because you're doing scheduling and it's really difficult.
Saves management time on scheduling.
Yes. The other thing is it actually
reduces your labor cost.
Yes, and it actually maximizes flexibility for all of the young people and the employees.
So how'd you start?
We started with an idea, and we actually started with friendships. When did we start? 2013. So there are three of us that started this thing. Matt and Chris are my buddies, and I've worked with Chris for about 12 years on a number of different projects and done really hard things with him, like staying up all night making films and doing all kinds of really difficult stuff. We've traveled around the world together doing different things. And so I knew him. I know he's an artist and he has talents that I don't. And when we work together, really cool things can happen. So the other partner is Matt. And this story is very similar. It's just a different discipline. So he's an engineer, programmer. He's very, very smart. He's way smarter than me. I mean, we're talking like 180 IQ. So very different
skills and expertise in these friends that you knew.
Yes, it's a very unlikely combination for a tech startup. Because what you have is, by trade, you have a communications person, myself. You have a filmmaker and a digital artist. And then you have one engineer, programmer. Okay,
so then how did it get started?
It got started because I actually called up 6 or 7 friends that I knew well. And I thought, this is the dream team. I felt a little bit like Danny Ocean. I was like, if you're going to rob a casino or if you're going to start a company, you need this person, like butcher, baker, candlestick maker. Right. Let's do this. And so it turns out that only 3 of us stuck because these other guys lived in different places or got different things came up, right? So startups are crazy and not everybody is, some folks are more risk averse.
Right.
And that's to their credit. Yes, this to their credit, actually. And so we started this thing as an idea, and it didn't become a company until March 2014.
Okay, what made it a company? Take us to the key things.
Well, we got on sunbiz.org and filled out the paperwork and got an EIN.
It became LLC.
Yeah.
We're official.
Yeah, but what's really funny is we actually thought we were starting a company when we did that. And as it turns out, here in 2016, as we've been learning about the process of actually doing a business, we've realized that all we've done to this point is essentially build a product.
Wow.
Just very different than building a business.
Building a product is not creating a value stream or a revenue stream.
Right.
Talk to us about that.
Well, so the guy who invented Wheaties did it by accident. Right. So he was making something else and accidentally dropped some of the cornmeal stuff on the stove, and it turned into a Wheaties cornflake. Wow. Of course, nobody knew it was Wheaties then.
I didn't know this story.
And that's where that cereal came from. So he very quickly invented a product. It took seconds, and he tasted it and was like, wow, this is amazing, right? And he thought everybody would want to have it. And I don't know the whole story there, but I'm telling you this because that product was very easy to create. We happen to be in a space where the product is much, much more complex than we gave it credit for when we started.
It's true. We always underestimate. We see a part of it, right? But you get in. How many people are using your product right now?
We have about 15,000 actual users that are represented by about 180 companies.
Okay. So you start learning a ton.
Oh, yes.
What you thought the problem was?
Yes. So you start having actual users give you feedback.
What has been some of the hardest parts of this journey for you guys?
I think some of the hardest parts is we've had basically zero capital to work with.
Oh, yeah. Under-resourced.
So if you've got time, talent, and treasure, we've had almost zero treasure and time and talent.
Yeah.
So it's really challenging. Now, you can accomplish a lot with the time and the talent. You really can.
Right.
But there comes a point where something begins to sort of break.
Right.
Having your hopes rise for something and then actually having it come crashing down.
Like a big client.
Yes, like a big client. So we had one of those. We kind of, it was sort of like being something that's about the size of a mosquito and you're talking to an elephant. And not knowing a lot about business, and we're learning as we go, and we're being strategic about that, which I can speak more to later, but not really understanding a lot about business to begin with, you don't even know what you're getting into, as was our case. And so here we are, a communicator, a digital artist, and a technologist, and we're outfitted to be design thinking, creators. And we've got something that we know will help the elephant.
Yeah.
But if you've ever, heard the story about what a bad idea it is to try to push an elephant, you can't do it.
Yeah.
Well, the good thing is our strategy was not to push the elephant, it was to pull it. So we started actually working with many of the individual stores as a part of this company, and we won them over, heart and soul. And so the only reason that the elephant found out about us was because so many of their own store operators were calling them and saying, you've got to take a look at this. Yes.
Yeah.
So we didn't call them, they called us. And in many ways, looking back now, we know we weren't ready for that conversation because we didn't know anything about, some of the basic business things, such as you need to understand what your customer actually needs. And half the time they don't tell you what that is.
Yeah. So what is your advice now on customer discovery and to all of us that are making things that we think are going to be perfect for our clients?
That is such a great question. I think essentially it is become aware of what you don't know as best you can, which means seeking out wise counsel and wise advice, which we've been doing. But the advice that you've given us and even seeking wise counsel, we have a board of advisors that's made up of one person officially and many others who are unofficial, just non-fiduciary responsibility guys.
So you've had tons of learning in the customer discovery.
Yes.
What have been your other, what you didn't know that you now know?
Okay, so one of the things that's been really challenging for us has been market validation. I think market validation is the discovery of, or actually answering the question in the affirmative or the negative as to whether or not there are people who will spend real money for what you've created. There are probably many situations that can learn from what we've been going through, but ours is kind of particularly interesting, I would say.
So what are the key things you've learned around market validation? Or what would you do different?
Well, gosh, I think that one of the way I'll describe the challenge that we've come into, where we're sitting currently with this, because this is kind of real time for us, is finding out whether the people who experience the pain or the ones who will get the benefit from the problem that you actually solve are in fact decision makers. We would look up and see, a large chain that has 2,000 or 4,000 stores and go, wow, this would be real money for a company like ours. And it's not a lot of money for them. And the not a lot of money for them is not an advantage. In fact, it's a disadvantage. I'll tell you why. Because the fact that you think you're going to save this company $10, $20 million next year sounds like a really good idea and they really should do this. But in many ways, that number to them is so small that it's like a rounding error.
Looking back at this little journey, if you could have known,
I would have taken the time to sit down with someone who actually had a business education from the beginning.
Okay, so get a mentor that has built a business before, or
Yes. And so in our case, where we don't have the treasure aspect with time and talent, if we're building a team around that and trusting that we can take this and go the distance, there's a couple of other disciplines.
So we needed a business mentor. What else?
Well, I'm not even just saying a mentor. I'm saying someone who would be a part of the team.
Okay, team member.
Yes.
What else?
That's really the main thing, because the introduction of that, which we have currently added to the team now, has breathed so much life into the situation.
They see around all these blind spots, which for you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
You haven't had the experience.
Mm-hmm. Well, my personal belief is that we're actually made in the image of a creative personality. So there's something inherent to every single one of us that makes us a creator. Now, not everyone is equipped or called to build a business,
right?
But you can create things. Yeah. You start out when you're a kid with crayons or whatever, and
everyone's creative.
Everyone's creative, but life has a way of snuffing that out. Yeah. I think in many ways, and I don't mean to, stir too many feathers, but I think the education system today, at least in the West, does a lot of things to kind of stifle creativity.
If you change anything about education, what would you change?
Oh, I would have it be so much more focused on creativity, actually, and just focused on why. On why. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I learning algebra? Yeah. Right. That's what always got me. I didn't have a problem with math. I was just I didn't understand the point. I was like, I'd rather be playing with sticks and building a fort. Love is something that gives hope. So if every person actually understood how much they were loved, it provides a foundation upon which we're actually designed to thrive based on that information. So in this world, things are hard. You get dealt cards. Everybody gets dealt different cards. In fact, this morning I was hanging out with this woman who is a part of our community, and she's got 3 kids. There's no dad in the picture for these 3 kids. And she just took a 3rd job to work 1:30 to 5:30 in the morning delivering papers so that she can make her bills. And we were asking her, like, when are you going to sleep? She's like, I'm not, but at least my bills will get paid. So this girl has a lot of resilience. But life is really hard. Yeah. And so you meet people like this all of the time. And what you don't want to do is just say, hey, these problems aren't real. You have to deal with them. Yeah. And if you're going to deal with them, you need to understand that there's a reason. And that reason is that you are loved deeply. And somehow...
Your faith is a huge part. How has it impacted your journey?
Well, having grown up in a church-going, Bible-believing, somewhat strict home, lots of rules and things like that. I wasn't allowed to listen to Michael Jackson when I was a kid because he was a bad influence, the music. And I don't fully disagree with that, though I love Michael Jackson now. I think it impacted me a lot, in particular, like I was saying before, when I got into college and met people from all different backgrounds. And you realize that if you stay stuck in your own way of thinking and just approach the world like I'm right and the way that I've grown up and the way that I think about everything is the only way to think about it, you're actually incorrect about that. So there's so many different ways that you can approach something. So when I talk about love being sort of the center of God's personality, Bono is one of my heroes, and he calls God's personality as love and logic.
Love and logic. The 2 of those things that work together. So God is brilliant. He's the most brilliant designer personality there is, which is sort of like looking at a crystal ball from 100 different ways. Like, you can never consume God fully because he's infinite. Yeah. So when you think about the beauty and the display and the artistry of all of the different types of things out there, whether it's just people, looking at people's faces, and every one of them is different. Even twins, they're different. And animals and the way that people approach life, it's amazing. It all stems from a creative artist. Yeah. And his personality is one that loves, like, lavishly. But the problem is we don't believe it. So it inspires me to help people
believe that love exists for
Experience
them. Yes.
What book do you give the most often as a gift? Or do you give books?
I do give books, but I'm also fully aware that people don't read books. They skim them, but they're going to read your book. I'm going to read your book. So, because I actually have one out on Amazon. I think it's been purchased like 7 times.
Yes, that's right. So what's your favorite? Do you have some favorite books?
My favorite book right now to give, and it's been this way for a while, is called The Divine Conspiracy.
The Divine Conspiracy.
Mm-hmm. So if you've heard of, gamification and things like that, well, the reason gamification is cool is because God himself is ingenuitive, and we love the story of it, right? So the title of the book, The Divine Conspiracy, kind of talks about what God did to do things that weren't expected.
Whoa.
And how most people, church-going people, completely misunderstand the words of Jesus. And they think that he's actually outlining all of these rules, when actually he's saying, there's all these things you're supposed to do, and you could never do them. You could never measure up. And therefore, I'm going to do it for you because I love you, and then make it possible so you'll actually be inspired. So why is inspiration even important? Well, it's because of the divine conspiracy that God himself wants to inspire us, so we're not robots.
That's our book. Do you listen to podcasts?
I'm terrible about podcasts.
Okay, so how do you have any kind of practices that keep you in sync on purpose?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different things that I've done over the years. One of the pieces of material that I've come into contact with and try to keep in my wheelhouse and bring touch points to it is called transformational leadership. Okay. It's unique, but a lot of the principles in it are things that, people have gotten maybe from other,
so what do you do?
Other places. But, I have a notebook that I actually go through these different tools. There's about 100 different tools in this transformational leadership workbook. And it's things like how to forgive, what it actually means to forgive. And so I actually am teaching this to my kids too, what it looks like to actually forgive. Because a lot of times, I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and my daughter, she's so sweet, but she can be very bossy too. And so her tone, we're talking to her all the time about her tone, and she'll boss her brother around, and it upsets him. So what I do is I slow it down for them, and I bring them both into a situation. I'm like, listen, let's talk about this and what happened. And I teach them about forgiveness. Because if one kid says, I'm sorry, we all know it's not a real apology. They're just sad they got caught. But adults do the same thing. We're not really sorry. We don't really want to change.
Other practices or spiritual practices?
Yes. So I do pray. I pray with my kids every night. And it's to a point now that they actually believe that God loves them too. And it's kind of the basis out of which we form our family relationships. Other things that I do is I have friends in my life now, and it's taken me a while to establish these friendships, but people that ask me hard questions.
Wow.
So,
accountability friendship.
Yes, accountability. You have to be transparent. You have to be transparent, I think, to be successful. Because if you're not, you can actually be quote unquote successful from maybe whatever your goal was, whether it's financial or career oriented, but then it's very lonely at the top. So again, at the core, we're designed to be in relationships. And if you're at the top, but you killed all your relationships to get there, there's no meaning to it. And you can see lots of examples of this today. So anyway, I have people in my life. I actually have men in their 60s and even women. I've introduced you to Judy. She's one of those people in my life.
Is a rock star.
Yeah, so she'll text me and be like, "How are you really doing?" So I've made it a practice to try to have people in my life who are at least 20 years older than me that I can ask questions. When I was growing up, I idolized Jim Valvano, who was a basketball coach for North Carolina State University. And he's gone on and he's passed on now. And he started the Jimmy V Cancer Foundation and all of that kind of stuff. But his speech for the ESPYs one year is something that you really should go see. And he talks about never giving up. And that's something that I've really held on to, that even if you fail, and I actually have a journal, because I actually journal too, but I have this journal entry where I made a bullet list of all the things that I tried that didn't work out.
So number 2?
Number 2 is definitely partner well. Partner
Who matters?
well. Oh, who is everything? What I mean by that is actually do your due diligence to know who it is that you're working with. You need to know that you can trust them to some degree. And you can't know everything about everyone. That's the challenge. But if you're pursuing a dream, don't be so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about your dream that you fail to go with your gut instinct and fail to actually do due diligence about the people you're working with. Find other friends that they've worked with in the past. Ask them hard questions.
Okay, number 3. Here's the third piece of advice.
Third piece of advice is understand that if you're working with people, that you're going to have problems and you need to plan for how you're going to deal with conflict. As you would probably echo, it's a journey, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And I think when you're starting something, it's quite possible that when you start something that you've only seen, 5% of the picture, even though you think you see 100% of the picture. And as you go, you're going to learn that you don't know very much. And don't be intimidated by that. So another quote by Bono that I really love, he actually says, the more you see, the less you know, and the less you find out as you go. I knew much more then than I do now. And what I love about it is there's kind of a humility to it where even though a lot of times what it takes to start something is, I think I have a good idea.
Yes, some level of confidence.
Yes.
Assertiveness.
You have pride in that idea.
Some courage.
And you need to. Otherwise, why start anything? Why would I try to sell you something if I don't believe in it? But at the same time, you've got to be flexible. We've got to learn to be flexible and then know when to say no. All of that flexibility needs to come into play, but just be willing to learn, and stick with it, even though you don't know everything coming into it.
You don't know what you don't know.
That's right.
And on that, where can we connect with you online?
Well, I'm on Twitter, so you can find me at Pezz.
Pezz?
That's everything. Twitter,
Pezz,
Instagram, everything. Yeah, but Shift Agent is our website for the company, so you can go check it out there. Even if you're not don't have the need, you can go check it out and give us feedback.
Yep.
Let us know what's wrong with it.
Shift Agent.
Mm-hmm.
As always, thank you, David. It is great to just hang out.
Yes.
Just hear more about your story that I didn't know. And I'm excited to see all the iterations and what's next for you guys.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun.
You are a dear rock star.